Blood and sand. These two elements have written more of history than ink ever could. In the scorching summer of 636 CE, they would combine again to reshape the world's destiny on the windswept plains of al-Qadissiyah. The Sasanian Empire, that ancient colossus of Persia, was dying. For 4 centuries, it had cast its shadow across the known world, its borders stretching from the Euphrates to the Indus. But empires, like men, grow old. Its armies, once invincible, now struggled to hold their ground. Its treasury, once overflowing with gold and silver, lay nearly empty. Its people, once proud to call themselves Persians, now whispered of rebellion in quiet corners of marketplaces. Meanwhile, across the burning sands of Arabia, a new power stirred. The Rashidun Caliphate, barely a decade old, but pulsing with the vigor of youth and the fire of conviction. At its helm stood Umar ibn al-Khattab, a man whose simple woolen garments belied his iron will. He was not born to royalty, wore no crown of gold, yet his authority reached deeper than any king's. For his power came not from inheritance, but from a promise, a divine covenant that had transformed camel herders into conquerors, desert wanderers into warriors of God. The world, Umar would often tell his companions, is changing before our eyes. We have been chosen to guide it toward the light. And so began one of history's most consequential confrontations, not merely a clash of swords, but a collision of worldviews that would redraw the map of civilization. In his modest council chamber in Medina, Umar sat, cross-legged on a simple mat. Sunlight filtered through narrow windows, casting long shadows across the earthen floor. His advisors gathered around him, faces etched with anticipation. "The people of Persia suffer under tyranny," Umar said, his voice measured yet resonant with purpose. "Their king claims divine right while taxing farmers into starvation. Their priests keep knowledge locked away in temples while common folk live in ignorance. Is this justice?" "Not at all, Commander of the Faithful," came the unified response. "Then we must offer them a choice, the same choice our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, offered to all humanity." Umar's eyes blazed with conviction. The choice between submission to false gods and liberation through submission to the one true God, Allah. A scribe dipped his reed pen into ink as Umar dictated words that would echo through centuries. The message to Yazdegerd III, the young Sasanian king, was both an invitation and a warning. Embrace Islam and find peace, or face the consequences of rejection. The Persian court at Ctesiphon stood in stark contrast to Umar's austere quarters. Marble columns soared toward painted ceilings, gold leaf gleamed from every surface, silk-clad courtiers whispered behind jeweled fans, while eunuchs glided across polished floors. When the Arab messenger arrived, dust still clinging to his travel-worn robes, the court fell silent, his head bowed before Yazdegerd, a youth barely into manhood who sat stiffly upon a throne too large for his frame. "Speak," commanded Yazdegerd, his voice cracking slightly with nervousness disguised as authority. The messenger unrolled the parchment and read Umar's words. "In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, from Umar ibn al-Khattab, commander of the faithful, to Yazdegerd, king of Persia. Peace be upon those who follow guidance. I call you to Islam, to worship Allah alone without partners, and to abandon the false gods of your fathers. Embrace this truth, and you will find peace and security under the justice of the Caliphate. Pay the jizya and live under our protection if you refuse to accept Islam. But if you turn away, know that the swords of Allah's soldiers are sharp, and we will come to free your people from your tyranny." A shocked murmur rippled through the court. Courtiers exchanged glances of outrage. Who were these desert dwellers to make demands of the King of Kings? Yazdegerd's face flushed crimson. He gripped the arms of his throne until his knuckles whitened. "You come from a land of hunger and hardship," he spat, "and dare to threaten me? I, whose ancestors ruled while yours wandered homeless among the dunes." He snapped his fingers and guards brought forward a burlap sack. "Take this to your master," Yazdegerd commanded, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "This soil from our frontier is all your people deserve. Let him know that if he wishes for more, our armies will bury him beneath it." The messenger's expression remained impassive as he accepted the sack. I shall deliver your response, King of Persia. May Allah guide your heart. When the sack of dry, barren soil was emptied at Umar's feet in Medina, the Caliph did not rage or curse. Instead, he knelt and took a handful, letting it sift through his fingers. Yazdegerd has not sent us soil, he said softly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. He has sent us the keys to his kingdom. Rising to his feet, Umar addressed his generals with quiet determination. Prepare for war, not for conquest's sake, but because a ruler who mocks the truth condemns his own people to darkness. Thus began the march toward destiny, a journey that would lead to al-Qadissiyah, where faith would test itself against the might of centuries. The Muslim army moved like a living organism across the desert, 30,000 strong. They traveled light, carrying only essentials: water, dried dates, weapons honed to lethal sharpness. Their horses, Arabian thoroughbreds with wide nostrils and powerful haunches, seemed to float above the sand. Leading them was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Though illness forced him to command from a litter, his strategic mind remained sharp as a falcon's gaze. Sa'd knew the Persians would outnumber them, perhaps 2 to 1, but numbers alone do not decide battles. Conviction does. Remember, he told his captains during nightly councils, we fight not for land or gold, but for something greater. We fight to liberate souls. At al-Qadissiyah, they found the Persian army waiting, a sea of gleaming armor and colorful banners stretching to the horizon. War elephants, massive as moving mountains, stood in formation behind rows of archers and spearmen. And commanding this awesome display of imperial might was Rustam Farrukhzad, last great general of a fading empire. Rustam had risen through merit rather than birth, his tactical genius earning him the king's favor. Yet, as he surveyed the Arab forces from atop his command platform, a form of doubt crept into his heart. These Arabs fight differently. Their eyes hold something our men lack, he said to his deputy. What is that, my lord? Asked the deputy. Certainty, Rustam replied. They do not fear death because they believe in something beyond it. Before committing to battle, Rustam requested a meeting with the Muslim representatives. Perhaps words might avert bloodshed. Perhaps understanding might lead to compromise. The Arab who entered Rustam's lavish tent was Ribi ibn Amir, a man whose weathered face told of years under harsh sun. His simple attire, a rough woolen cloak and sandals, stood in sharp contrast to the opulence surrounding him. Persian officers, dripping with gold and jewels, smirked at his appearance. Rustam sat elevated on cushions, resplendent in armor, inlaid with precious metals. Why have you come to our lands? He demanded, voice echoing in the cavernous tent. What drives you from your desert homes to challenge the might of Persia? Ribi planted his spear in the ground before speaking, his voice surprisingly resonant for a man of his stature. Allah has sent us to deliver his creatures from the worship of creation to the worship of the Creator, from the narrowness of this world to its vastness, and from the oppression of religions to the justice of Islam. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Accept our message, and we will leave you in peace. Reject it, and we will bring people who love death as you love life. Rustam's face darkened. Your words are bold for a man standing in the shadow of Persian spears. We do not stand in the shadow of your spears, Ribi replied calmly, but in the light of Allah's mercy, it shines equally on all who accept it, king or slave, Persian or Arab. The meeting ended without resolution. As Ribi departed, Rustam turned to his officers. Prepare for battle at dawn, he ordered. These men cannot be bought with gold or intimidated by displays of power. They must be defeated by steel. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, both armies prepared for what would come. In the Persian camp, soldiers polished armor and sharpened blades, while priests performed ancient rituals for victory. Wine flowed freely as commanders made final adjustments to their battle plans. In the Muslim camp, men performed wudu, ritual ablution, before standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer. Quran reciters moved among them, their voices carrying verses of courage and perseverance. Those with families wrote final letters, entrusting them to messengers bound for distant homes. There was no wine, no revelry, only purpose. Sa'd addressed them after the night prayer, his voice carried by runners to the furthest ranks. Tomorrow, we face an army that fights for a king. But we fight for something far greater. We fight for justice. We fight for truth. We fight for generations yet unborn who will live in the light of Islam if Allah grants us victory. A chorus of Allahu Akbar thundered across the plain, reaching the Persian lines and sending a chill down Rustam's spine as he recognized what he faced. Not just men, but conviction incarnate. Dawn broke blood-red across al-Qadissiyah. The air hung heavy with anticipation as battle lines formed on either side of the field. Persian war drums pounded a rhythmic heartbeat that seemed to make the very earth tremble. Elephants trumpeted, their enormous feet stamping impatiently. Sunlight glinted off thousands of spear points, creating a forest of steel ready for harvest. The Muslims formed their lines in silence, broken only by murmured prayers and the soft chink of mail. Saad, unable to lead from horseback due to his illness, positioned himself atop a small hill where he could observe the battlefield. From there, he would direct his commanders through a system of flags and runners. Rustam gave the signal, and the Persian advance began. A slow, inexorable wave of humanity moving forward in perfect formation. The ground shook with their coordinated footfalls. When they were within range, their archers shot the first volley. Thousands of arrows arcing high into the sky before plummeting toward the Muslim ranks. "Shields," came the cry, and a wall of leather and wood rose to meet the deadly rain. Some arrows found their mark, and men fell, but nowhere near as many as Rustam had hoped. Then it was the Muslims' turn. Their cavalry, light, mobile, and fearless, surged forward like a desert storm, horsemen leaning low over their mounts' necks as they charged. They struck the Persian lines not in a single mass, but in multiple hammer blows, hitting, withdrawing, then striking again in a different place. The battle seesawed throughout that first day, Persian numbers pushing the Muslims back, Muslim fervor allowing them to recover lost ground. By nightfall, neither side could claim victory, only exhaustion. Day 2 brought new horrors. Rustam ordered his elephants forward, their armored bulk creating panic among the Arab horses. Riders were thrown, infantry trampled beneath massive feet. For a moment it seemed the Muslim line would break, but Saad had anticipated this. Signal flags waved frantically from his position, and special units armed with long spears and burning torches moved to intercept the beasts. They targeted the elephants' eyes and trunks, their most sensitive areas. Maddened with pain, several elephants turned and crashed back through Persian ranks, causing havoc among their own forces. By the third day, both armies were bloodied and weary. The battlefield had become a hellscape of mud and gore, the air thick with the cries of the wounded and dying. But it was on this day that fate would reveal its hand. A sudden sandstorm swept across the plain, blinding the Persian forces while blowing at the Muslims' backs. In that moment of confusion, Saad ordered a full assault. "Allah has sent us his aid," he shouted. "Forward, soldiers of truth." The Muslim army surged forward with renewed strength, penetrating deep into Persian formations. Rustam, realizing the danger, rushed to reinforce the center. It was then that fate found him. Cut off from his bodyguards during the confusion of the sandstorm, he found himself surrounded by Muslim fighters. He fought with all the skill of his illustrious career, his sword a blur of deadly precision. But numbers told. A spear thrust caught him in the side. As he staggered, a sword stroke separated his head from his shoulders. The great general of Persia fell, his blood soaking into the same earth he had vowed to defend. Word of Rustam's death spread through the Persian ranks like wildfire. Panic took hold. The orderly retreat became a rout, with thousands throwing down their weapons and fleeing towards Ctesiphon. Saad, watching from his hill, raised his hands in prayer. "Not to us, O Allah, not to us, but to your name be the glory," he whispered, tears cutting clean tracks down his dust-covered face. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Ctesiphon fell within months, its legendary treasures, including the massive carpet of Khusro, woven with silk and gold and studded with precious gems, becoming spoils of war. Yazdegerd III fled eastward, a king without a kingdom, clinging to a hollow title. For 4 years he wandered from city to city, each one falling to the advancing Muslims shortly after his departure. Finally, in 651 CE, his luck ran out in Merv. Seeking shelter at a mill, he was murdered for the few treasures he still carried. An inglorious end for the heir to 4 centuries of imperial might. The Battle of al-Qadissiyah didn't just change the political landscape of the Middle East. It fundamentally altered the course of human history. Where once stood the fire temples of Zoroastrianism, mosques now rose toward heaven. Where Persian was once the language of governance and culture, Arabic became the tongue of administration and scholarship. A new civilization was being born, one that would preserve ancient knowledge while adding invaluable contributions of its own. Had the battle gone differently, had Rustam prevailed and the Muslim advance been halted, our world today might be unrecognizable. There might have been no Islamic Golden Age, no preservation of Greek philosophy, no advances in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine that would later help Europe climb out of its dark ages. This wasn't merely a military victory. It was a pivotal moment when history itself seemed to hold its breath before choosing a path forward. The courage of those who fought and died at al-Qadissiyah on both sides echoes still across the centuries, reminding us that civilizations rise and fall not just through force of arms, but through the power of ideas and the strength of conviction. As the dust settled over the battlefield, with the calls to prayer rising for the first time across the conquered lands, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas looked towards the distant horizon. The journey that had begun with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in a cave outside Mecca had now reached the ancient heartland of Persia. But it was far from over. Today, al-Qadisiyyah, he said to his commanders as they gathered around him, tomorrow the world. History would prove him right. At Chronicle Portal, we don't just recount history, we uncover its soul, its lessons, its power to shape what comes next. Stay with us, subscribe, like, and join the conversation in the comments. Your voice matters. Together, we'll bring the untold stories of yesterday into the light of today and forge a deeper understanding of tomorrow. Because history doesn't just belong to the past, it belongs to you.